light and darkness. Perhaps this is the answer to many of our questions. Solitude and the dark, working on our imaginations, can play what tricks they will. And whether we truly see an apparition, or merely think we do, becomes immaterial. For this is the true unknown, not the hair-raising, spine-chilling tales of witchcraft, the turnip ghost fantasies and solemnly wrought Gothic mysteries of the past, but man's simple, primeval fear of darkness.
Morley Old Hall has stood for centuries, its history woven with tales of power, tragedy and the paranormal. Behind its Grand Tudor facade, rumours of ghostly encounters have persisted for decades. Visitors have described an unsettling presence, others have witnessed ghostly apparitions, and some have said that there's an atmosphere that seems to shift faster than when I make an edgy joke in my videos. But in 1964, a British television broadcast turned local whispers into a national sensation when viewers claimed to see something strange lurking in the background. And I'm not talking about a Starbucks coffee cup left behind by one of the crew members. I'm Bleaki, and today I'll tell you about the lost documentary that was supposed to shed light on how paranormal investigations were performed in the 60s, but accidentally caught the image of a ghost that the production team didn't realise was stalking them. Built in the 16th century, Morley Old Hall is an impressive Grade 1 listed building that is rich in architectural history. The dining hall, with its large Tudor fireplace, is one of the most notable rooms in the house. From here, visitors step into the drawing room, which is an elegant space that transforms people back in time to its original design. This room, and the rest of the house for that matter, would be instantly recognisable to the hall's first owner, John Sedley. Sedley, an architect in the service of Henry VII and later Henry VIII, designed Morley Old Hall, and much of its original design for the house has remained the same for centuries. I guess it's true what they say, if you wait long enough, all styles come back into fashion. I'm just waiting for the emo fringe to come back. I may be waiting a while. Despite the changes that have happened over the years, the hall remains a timeless relic, giving it a physical connection to the past. And it may be that link that has kept paranormal entities tethered all this time. Morley Old Hall has a long and interesting history, and its list of previous owners read like a who's who of English influential figures. Over the years, it has passed through the hands of several wealthy and historically significant people, each of whom have left their mark on the building. One such owner was Field Marshal Sir Edmund Ironside, and no, I'm not talking about the dude in the wheelchair from that old detective show. He was a prominent military figure who served as Commander-in-Chief of Home Forces during the Second World War. In the 1970s, Janet Shankaid, the first wife of Peter Shankaid, who would later become the stepfather of Diana, Princess of Wales, also called Morley Old Hall their home. Janet's connection to the British royal family added a layer of intrigue to the property, and no doubt bumped the price up on Zoopla. In 1964, Anglia TV set out to document a typical paranormal investigation, which they called The Unknown. But little did they know, they were about to capture an apparent unsettling moment of paranormal activity. What was intended as an ordinary television documentary about a skeptical parapsychologist's investigation at Morley Old Hall in Norfolk would unexpectedly turn into a spectacle that would leave viewers questioning the boundaries between the living and the dead. The goal was clear. Parapsychologist Tony Cornell, who was involved in the haunting of Hanneth Hall, which I've already covered on my channel, would lead the investigation and attempt to uncover any truth behind the alleged hauntings of Morley Old Hall. While by today's standards it wouldn't really count as an investigation, as it's mainly just explaining what Tony's doing and a dramatic walkthrough of the building, what followed was far from what the sceptical Cornell could have ever anticipated. When the Anglia TV crew rocked up, their job was to follow Cornell's investigation.
There are two objects still left for intensive research: the dark side of the moon and the life beyond life. As we only had a film van and 2 cameras, we chose the second. Light and rain in a house 400 years old promise much in the way of incidental shocks, with perhaps a revelation or two en route. And nothing in this foam-girt, owl-crazed, history-drenched isle is more conducive to thoughts of melancholy and the supernatural than a vast mansion at the sad end of a lane that appears to have been trodden out of primal grass by a party of punch-drunk dinosaurs.
I know you're in a rush to catch evidence of a phantom, but at least Fred let Daphne out the van. While the team set up during a time of supernatural resurgence in the 1960s, they focused on the Society of Psychical Research, which approached all their cases with scientific scrutiny and was happy to explain how early paranormal investigations were done. By the end of the documentary, Cornell shared his thoughts on whether Morley Old Hall was really haunted, and sadly, he said he didn't find any concrete evidence to support the rumours. You big spoil sport.
Well, Tony, it's now, 20 to 4. We've been here since about 10 o'clock. We saw you setting up. We saw you make a minute examination of the whole house. We've seen your various traps and things. We've heard what various inmates have had to say about the house. What do you think?
Well, quite honestly, I don't think it's haunted. There isn't sufficient evidence, I should say, at this stage to suggest that this house is haunted. Although 1, 2, 3 people have felt things, and there have been reports of the lady having been seen standing here. I don't quite honestly think the evidence is enough to say that this place is haunted.
But when the documentary aired on August 24th, 1964, something bizarre happened. As the camera rolled, viewers at home were trying to focus on Cornell's investigation, but found themselves transfixed by an unexpected and unexplainable sight. The footage was said to have captured a figure that appeared to be a hooded monk lurking in the background. In fact, immediately after the show aired, 5 people contacted Anglia TV, claiming that they had seen a monk standing in the background during the last interview between Cornell and the interviewer, Michael Robson. The sighting prompted a rebroadcast of the documentary, with the host asking viewers to write in and share what they had seen. And the results were crazy. 27 viewers responded, with 15 describing the figure as a monk or a priest. One even claimed that they had seen a hooded skull within the footage. The response was so intense that the station decided to air the footage again, this time invited even more viewers to comment on the mysterious apparition. At this point, it just seemed like the network was just milking the documentary for attention and views, kind of like how loads of YouTubers make 300 videos on the same trending topic. I mean, there's only so many ways you can tell me that Trump has sent Putin one of his wigs along with a BFF bracelet.
You are fake news.
Sir,
go ahead.
Years later, the Society of Psychical Research took a closer look at the footage in question. A member said that the documentary had gained a particular kind of fame because of the ghostly encounter and had earned a reputation as video proof of the existence of ghosts. Unfortunately, Cornell and his colleagues believed that the figure was nothing more than an illusion known as pareidolia, created by the patterns on the stonework and shadows. However, the viewers remain unconvinced with this explanation. But what is pareidolia? Pareidolia is when our brains tricks us into seeing familiar patterns, like faces, animals or objects, in random things like clouds or tree bark. Pareidolia has been blamed for many supernatural sightings and claims, like the guy who saw a demon in his glass of Coke, or the woman who saw God in her cheese toastie. Now that's the kind of breaking bread I can get behind. This happens because our brains don't just take in raw visuals, they actively try and make sense of what we see, sometimes adding meaning that isn't really there. The fusiform face area in the brain is designed to recognise faces, which is why we spot them in everything from a grilled cheese sandwich to the man in the moon. A study conducted in 2020 says this quick face recognition actually helped humans survive by detecting animals or human faces in their surroundings, or more importantly, when our ancestors were being hunted or facing dangerous animals. I still use it now. When I see someone eyeing up the last samosa at the all-you-can-eat buffet, I pounce. I'm sure my primitive ancestor would be proud. Interestingly, brain scans show that when we see these faces in objects, our brains react the same as they would if they saw a real face. So while those faces in the cloud aren't actually there, our brains are wired to believe they are. The viewers' account of what they saw during the documentary varied, but many descriptions were weirdly similar. You have to remember, this was decades before the internet, so it would have been impossible for people to influence each other. Mrs. G.D. Hayden of Bromham, for instance, describes seeing the outline of a priest to the right of Cornell and to the left of the interviewer. Similarly, Mrs. and Mr. Carter of Lincolnshire reported a very clear view of the figure, with Mrs. Carter even creating a drawing of what she had seen, although I can't find that drawing now. Others, like Elvira Panetta from Norwich, reported seeing a monk peering through a window, describing him as cowled, bearded, and his hands slightly raised. Nora Connor Neno from Suffolk described a more disturbing sight. At first she thought she saw a skull with a hood, but as soon as the men continued speaking, the figure seemed to come forward and peer in, eventually transforming into a gaunt-looking face with a horrible leer. Bill Johnson recently shared his experience at Morley Old Hall on her forum and said, "A few of us were once on a Sunday walk when, by accident, we ended up at Morley Old Hall. None of us have heard of the place, but it was completely derelict and obviously just waiting to be explored. I can't remember who I was with, but I recall going up the stairs with the other person and into a room. Suddenly, we were both overcome with a feeling of panic, ran down the stairs, out of the house, and we never went back." A couple of years later, after I left Wyndham, I was watching a programme about ghosts on Anglia television when I heard them mention Morley Old Hall, which apparently had a reputation for being haunted. I could feel my flesh creep, as I had been unaware of its ghostly past. The following week, there was a follow-up on TV, as some viewers had rung in to say that they had seen a mysterious figure in the background of the television picture. I think it's quite interesting that he got that feeling without any prior knowledge of the haunting, or without being influenced by the popularity of the case. With that being said, he might have just got the creeps walking into an old abandoned building. But who was this monk supposedly caught on camera? Some people think the monk spotted by viewers might actually be the ghost of Alexander de Langley, who was once the prior of Wyndham. He apparently went mad from studying too much and is said to have committed a terrible crime at the hall. There must have been some underlying mental issue there. If studying too much could drive people crazy, every university in the world would turn into an asylum. You don't have to be mad to study here, but it helps. But the mysterious monk doesn't seem to stick to one spot. He's also said to hang around the Binham Priory, 35 miles away from the hall, which was founded back in 1091 and housed a Benedictine community for over 400 years. In 1935, the Norwich Evening News reported on a sighting of the monk at the Priory. The story was written with a bit of a flair, saying, "On a dark gloomy night, the figure standing among the ruins of Binham Priory makes for a perfect ghost story setting." The article went on to mention that the locals were talking about a ghost of a black hooded monk in the old parish church, which was part of the priory back in the day. The vicar shared that a well-known woman had seen the figure while attending an evening service there. She spotted the monk walking along a ledge near the church door, slowly making his way across the church and then disappearing after climbing some spiral steps. The woman didn't want to be named because she feared the story might be laughed at, but she was pretty sure she'd seen the monk-like figure. Apparently, other villagers have seen a similar figure near the Goal Gate, which used to be part of the priory. Some even described it as a dark monk-like figure, and a few others mentioned seeing a porter who used to hang around the Goal Gates. There were even reports of a black cowled figure roaming the grounds at night, possibly emerging from a tunnel connecting the priory to a shrine at Walsingham, 3 miles away. Now the question is, could the Binham monk be the same as the mad monk from Morley? When Alexander de Langley's behaviour became too much to handle for the monks, he was flogged and locked up in Binham until he died. In a 1933 report, the Eastern Daily Press shared that work was about to start on a crypt that hadn't been touched for 400 years. The article speculated that maybe the crypt had never been disturbed because that's where poor Alexander, after being exorcised without success, was locked in chains to end his madness once and for all. But the plan didn't work, and the monk would scream and yank at his chains, mumbling about all the knowledge he knew about the world, like it was too much to comprehend. The monks, at their wits' end, figured walling him up would be the only way to stop his outbursts. And that's what they did, with the last brick muffling his cries. They simply left him to his madness, and the cruel decay of the physical human form without nutrients took hold. The personal testimonies that poured in after the second airing of the footage were even more frequent than the first, with many viewers adamant that they had seen a monk in the background. The figure, they insisted, wasn't a trick of the light or a pattern, but a real apparition, visible as plain as day on the screen. But I can't say the same. I've been through the documentary frame by frame, looking for the ghost in the window between Cornell and the interviewer, and all I can see is shadows. Keep in mind that I can watch this documentary on a large high quality screen and have the benefits of being able to go back, rewatch it, or look at each frame. Back in 1964, viewers didn't have this luxury, and they couldn't go back to check what they thought they had seen. Also, this was a really early paranormal investigation style show, and people's understandings of what is a ghost or what is a silhouette cast from a stone was still not commonly known. We also need to take into consideration that these types of shows were still in their infancy, and the way that they were narrated, along with the creepy music, could have caused a heightened sense of fear, which caused imaginations to run wild. Hell, I still do it now. I get all descriptive of the haunting, add some creepy music on in the background, and then boom, the Phantom and the Budgie Smuggler turns up. While I think it's quite interesting that 5 people reported seeing something similar when the show first aired, I think after the sightings were addressed publicly and the show was re-aired, it either inspired mass hysteria, wishful thinking, or just people trying to get attention or get involved in the interest surrounding the case. Today, the footage of the supposed ghostly monk remains a fascinating case in the world of the paranormal. Whether or not the figure captured on camera is truly a ghost or merely an optical illusion caused by the hall's intricate stonework, the incident sparked a wider conversation about the nature of paranormal investigations and the role television had in reporting on the supernatural. In fact, I'd probably go as far to say that documentaries like this one allowed paranormal shows and YouTube channels like mine to exist. They took the risk to talk about the supernatural during a time when it was taboo. For Tony Cornell, the experience was a humbling one, as even he couldn't completely explain the events that had unfolded during the filming of the documentary. His initial skepticism, claiming that it was just pareidolia, was challenged by the overwhelming testimonies of the viewers who were convinced that they had witnessed something paranormal and that they shouldn't be just dismissed. Morley Old Hall continues to stand as a reminder of how even the most skeptical investigator can be caught off guard by the mysteries of the unseen world. In the end, the investigation at Morley Old Hall didn't just capture the interest of viewers, it captured their imaginations. It remains one of the most intriguing and groundbreaking moments in the history of ghost hunting, a moment that blurred the line between reality and the unknown. The ghost the documentary was supposed to focus on was actually that of a beautiful woman who had been seen at the window. It came to Anglia TV's attention after renowned American paranormal investigator Hans Holzer, along with author Ruth Plant and her friend, conducted a vigil at the hall to further explore the claims of the haunting. Holzer, known for his thorough investigations, hoped to shed light on the alleged presence of this mysterious spirit. After spending an uneventful night at the hall, Ruth Plant was leaving the room in the morning to go grab breakfast, which I hope was a bacon sandwich and a cappuccino, as that is the breakfast for champions. But that's when she had a bizarre experience.
But this is too much on the fringe to help with the central ghost of the hall. So we speak to someone who's had what she feels are psychic experiences in this very room.
Miss Pratt, we're very lucky to find you here. How lucky we'll find out shortly, but you don't live in this house, but you have had an experience here that you believe to be supernatural. What is it?
Yes, I stayed here a night about Easter time, and when I was crossing this room, I felt impelled to stop at this window and gaze out. As you see, it's got no glass, it's extremely cold day, but in spite of that, I felt this sort of wonderful, peaceful presence, and I'm usually a very rushed person. I felt myself slowed up, and I felt that it was a lady that was here, probably a very devout sort of lady. I sort of felt that she was probably a Catholic or something, because I heard some Catholic prayers, and I wanted to look at the view very much. That was the sort of impression I received.
You felt as though you were living through what she was doing?
Yes, that was it. I took on her mood, so to speak.
Did you get an idea of the period in which she was living, the historical period?
No, I should have said it was a good many 100 years ago.
Did any of your friends have any other experiences in this house apart from yourself?
Yes, the friend I brought with me in the early morning when I'd gone out to get the breakfast and she was lying in bed, she suddenly sat up apparently because she heard heavy breathing and the rustling of something.
Was she frightened?
She was a little, and she strained to hear it, but she couldn't hear it. She sat up, so she lay down again, then it occurred again while she was lying down.
People living in the hall prior to this moment had reported seeing the ghostly woman looking out the window woefully, but it seems that the resident ghost kind of got overshadowed by this supposed sighting of Alexander D. Langley and has somewhat been forgotten in the years since. In fact, the spirit hasn't been seen for decades. I reached out to Richard Warden, who owned Morley Old Hall from 2001 to around 2010, along with his wife Alison, and he told me that he and his family didn't experience anything paranormal while they lived there. He also mentioned that some articles and forums identified the female ghost as the Grey Lady, which came with its own little rhyme.
There is a grey lady who haunts Morley Old Hall on the 10th of the 10th, on the 11th of the 11th, and on the 12th of the 12th. On the 10th she sits on your bed, on the 11th she tickles your feet and strokes your head. On the 12th she strangles you with a bog chain. I'm in the 12th bed. I declare myself already dead.
Yep, this ghost is said to have attacked people with a toilet chain, and by all accounts, it left her victims looking flushed. The problem with the tale of the Grey Lady is that it happened in a completely different location. Richard told me that the story had been confused with the ghost haunting Morley Hall, a different building that was built much later. That's got to be confusing for the postman. I wonder how many times I delivered the caviar to the wrong place. The beautiful ghost said to once haunt Morley Old Hall has never been identified and could have simply been inspired by the Gothic architecture and a fictitious story that took on a life of its own as the tale was passed down for generations. With that being said, that doesn't explain away the experience Ruth Plant had. For the Wardens, Morley Old Hall was simply a beautiful, peaceful place to call home, a place that was painstakingly restored by the family, which let this time capsule of 16th century architecture continue to be frozen in time. And maybe that's the reason why the ghostly activity seemed to calm down, as the spirits are happy that the place that they once called home is still recognisable, even centuries later. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. It goes a really long way. Also, I've just started a Discord channel that I'll link in the description. Here you guys can talk to me about the paranormal in real time, watch any bonus content that I make, get told the second a new video drops, and hopefully build a really cool community of paranormal lovers. So I hope to see you there, and until next time, sleep well, friends.
A phantom whisper in the dead of night, knocks and scratches where there is no light. Forgotten tales of torment long forgotten, tales of lost souls, the tragic and rotten. The truth is bleak, but you know it's inside.